Can the remake really be better than the reboot? I know that many of you believe that the reboot is going to be better than the remake, but I want to give you some additional arguments of the problems that can happen in the remake and that basically makes the reboot the smarter proposition. Let's start by explaining the difference between a remake and a reboot so everyone can get a good understanding of what Hasbro supposedly wants to do with Power Rangers now. Remember that everything we are going to talk about are just rumors that have leaked all over the internet since Hasbro has not given any official news yet, and hopefully for the San Diego Comic-Con they can give us some real news. Let's define this very simply. The remake is to create a new series based on an old series using the same story, the same characters, the same style, and only changing some details. In a remake they obviously change the actors since they are trying to bring those characters back to life, and they can never use the original actors since they are not the right age to play the character. In the case of Power Rangers, the characters are supposed to be young at the beginning of the story and the original actors are almost all around 50 years old. The reboot is something fresher since they only have to use the core idea of the product and can create something completely new. In the reboot they can create a new story, new characters, a new style, and obviously new actors as well. In the case of Power Rangers, the only thing the reboot should have is the core idea of what this franchise is all about, such as colorful heroes, costumes, power, battles, villains, and some other details. If we rely on the 2017 movie, we will realize that it was a reboot despite having used the same names of the characters since the story was completely different, the style was different, and even the personalities of the characters were different. If Hasbro does a remake of Mighty Morphin, then the characters should have the same names, but they should also have the same personalities they had in the original series. This does not mean that they will say the same dialogues, but that the story is more or less the same and that their personality does not change. For example, now they can't create a Billy who is dumb or a Zack who can't dance. These things are very important attributes of the character, and in a remake they must have them too. Now that you know the difference between a remake and a reboot, let's explain the problems Hasbro is going to face with the remake they supposedly want to do. First, we must remember the beginnings of Power Rangers, and the franchise always depended on Sentai, a Japanese series that created everything. Basically, the idea of Power Rangers was to use the action scenes from the Sentai and film the dialogue scenes with American actors. This way they saved a lot of money in the creation of all the action scenes, but this also included a saving of creativity since the Sentai always provided them with the whole idea. In Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, it was the first time the Power Rangers franchise was able to create their own costumes, and also quite a different story as they didn't rely on Sentai for almost anything. The only scenes they used from Sentai in Cosmic Fury were the Zord scenes, and this is also an important part to mention. The Zords have always been a very controversial part as it is something that cost a lot of money to create, and this also always represented a big money saver for Power Rangers because they used all the Sentai scenes. The difficult thing about using all those scenes was being able to adapt all of that to create a different story while still making sense of what they were trying to tell. For many years they used professional people who used the Megazord costume to film the battles with the giant monsters, and that's a big investment of money. In order to create these battles, they have to create the costumes, find a large place to film, and create the whole city in miniature to make the two gladiators look like giants. In the same rumor it had been mentioned that the budget that the remake is going to have is similar to the budget that the special episode had, and this is important to mention. In the special episode they did not want to do the Megazord scenes by filming the actors using a real suit and preferred to use a Megazord created in 3D. According to what the producer of this project said, they had to do it this way since it was going to be too expensive to create the whole set, bring the suit from Japan and rehearse the whole battle. This was also going to take too much time, and since all productions have a time limit, they had to create everything in 3D. The time limit is also an important part because, if they don't meet the time limit, each additional day is going to cost them more money than the budget. This means that, if the budget was $100 and each day of production costs $10, then they must finish everything in 10 days. If they finish everything in 12 days, then they will go over budget and the final expense will no longer be $100, it will now be $120. Obviously, this is something that cannot happen because that extra $20 basically represents a loss, and the company is obviously not going to like this. Here we already have the first huge problem they are going to have to face, since, if they decide to have a budget like the one in the special episode, then I would like to know how they are going to create the battles of the Megazords. Remember that in the 1993 Mighty Morphin they didn't have this problem because these scenes were from Japan, but now they have to create all those scenes from scratch since they can't use all those old scenes because of their low visual quality. If they decide to use the same technique they used in the special episode, I don't think it's a good idea since the Megazord was the most criticized thing about that project. We all have to be honest. The Megazord looked great aesthetically, but the animation was horrible. On top of that, the monster also looked pretty bad, and we all know that that battle created in CGI is never going to beat the Megazord battles created by real people wearing a suit. In order for a CGI robot battle to be better than a real person battle, they have to create near perfect animation, the robot has to look almost real, and the special effects have to be spectacular. Obviously, the problem with this is that in order to achieve this they have to invest a lot of money, and that is exactly what they don't have. So, if they don't have the money to create spectacular CGI and they don't have the money to create the Megazords using real people wearing the costumes, we assume they are going to give us the same horrible animation they gave us in the special episode. This can be very understandable since this remake is also going to be aimed for a child audience and kids don't see those details. For them a CGI battle is just as good, even if it has horrible animation, because they don't realize the difference. Even in the last series we had of Power Rangers we could see many CGI animations of Zords that were pretty terrible, but this was always something irrelevant for the audience. Another detail we don't know is about the creation of the costumes, and it is not known if they are going to use the same original Mighty Morphin costumes or if they are going to create something new. This would be another expense in the budget since they are going to have to hire costume designers, and although Power Rangers have always had to create costumes, they have never been original except in Cosmic Fury. Designing a costume is not the same as creating it, since designing it is about creating the whole idea, but creating them refers to making the costume using the idea that was already created. The whole success of the remake is going to depend on the money invested, and although they may not have to invest the same amount of money that they should invest in a reboot, it is still a better idea to invest a little more money to create a reboot that will have a better chance of being a success. Write in the comments if you prefer a remake or a reboot, like this video and subscribe to never reboot this Power Rangers channel.